Thank you, witnesses, for being here. General Walker, let me start with you, if I could. You've testified to several senators today that you faced restrictions for the deployment of the quick reaction force that you had assembled, and those are restrictions that you had not had to deal with before. Is that broadly correct?
That is correct.
What is your understanding for why those restrictions were put in place?
Well, Senator, it was never really explained to me. So I'm a major general. I don't question the people above me. The Secretary of the Army is the Secretary of the Army. Secretary of Defense is the Secretary of Defense. So all I know is that it was I had restrictions that were unusual to me. I hadn't had them in the past.
Mr. Solisas, let me ask you about your response to this. You said something earlier to Senator Portman that caught my attention. You said to him, when he was asking about the same issue, you said that, and I'm quoting you now, several things happened in the spring, end quote, that may have led to these changes. What are you referring to there?
Senator, what I'm referring to is there was a number of incidents in the spring where we had helicopters flying above U.S. citizens. We had spy planes, RC-26 flying over folks who were protesting. We also had law enforcement officers that were in military uniforms, which sometimes confused people. So when the new secretary came in, he wanted to make sure that he had guidance on making decisions. Now, I will point out, Senator, that the Secretary of Defense is the only authority to order military personnel into civil disturbance operations. That is the Secretary of Defense. This is more clarifying information because it talks about not just civil disturbance, it talks about using helicopters, using planes, using types of equipment. That's why the memo was published, was for that reason, because of the events in the spring. The Secretary of Defense wanted to have that authority vested in him. It was a very clear chain of command. It went from the Secretary of Defense to the Secretary of the Army to General Walker.
Thank you for that answer. So if I understand you correctly, the events of the spring, which we're all familiar with, I mean, we had the attack on the White House where 60 Secret Service officers were injured. The president had to be evacuated into a bunker. A church across the street from the White House was lit on fire. We had the incidents in Portland, Oregon, where 277 federal officers were injured at the federal courthouse there. We had rioting in various other cities across the country, including in Washington. This, of course, was politically controversial, the use of the National Guard in some of those incidents, the use of the National Guard here in Washington, D.C. The Washington Post even reported on this. For instance, June the 4th, 2020, Humvees helicopters in the National Guard, D.C. officials pushed back on show of federal force on city streets. And then from January 4th, National Guard, this is still a Post, National Guard activated for D.C. protests with more restraints than in June. So it's the picture here, Mr. Solisas, if I got this right, that we had these, we had riots, we had civil unrest in the summer. The National Guard was involved in some of these to some extent. That was politically controversial, as journalists at the time documented. I'm sure people watching this are very familiar with. That then led in some way to this reaction where, well, we're going to be careful. We're going to be more careful. We're going to put some restraints on how we deploy the Guard that we previously haven't before. Have I got that correct?
You do, Senator. That's exactly what happened, Senator.
Okay.
And just to call into mind that we had a new secretary, too. Secretary Esper had left. Secretary Miller came in. He was aware of the events, and he wanted to make the decisions at his level.
Right. Got it. I think that's helpful. I think that's very helpful clarifying testimony. I think that's something that this committee and committees and Congress is going to have to grapple with as we go forward, that there was a political reaction to events from over the summer, and that political reaction resulted in restraints being put on Guard deployment that ultimately ended up being dangerous on the day here on January the 6th. Ms. Sandborg, can I come to you for a second and just follow up on something that Senator Paul was asking about? I had the chance to talk with Director Wray yesterday in the Judiciary Committee in a wide-ranging hearing there, and one of the things I asked him about were these reports about private companies who have conducted broad searches of their customer databases and then turned over, according to reports, turned over this information voluntarily. He said he didn't know one way or the other. I heard you give a similar response to Senator Paul. You said you'd follow up with him. Can I ask you to do the same with me with specifics about that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And let me just ask you a little more broadly. To your knowledge, has the FBI requested or required private companies to turn over metadata in order to identify individuals who may have been present in the capital region or engaged in violence on the 6th?
Anything we would have requested from any of those companies would have been via subpoena or search warrant, so via lawful process.
But
And I would have to get you the background of when we may have asked for that or not. I'm not positive of the situation, but I just would reiterate that if we obtain that, it would be from a lawful court order or a subpoena.
Yeah, Director Ray gave me a similar answer yesterday, but he similarly said he did not know of the specifics. That was his language, so he didn't actually know if there had been any such requests or not. I think he also went on to say he wouldn't be surprised, but he just didn't know. So you're telling me you don't have any additional knowledge of the specifics?
I'm definitely not aware of a situation where we requested it. Whether or not somebody offered it, both of those are things I would like to follow up. Any request would have come with legal process. Whether it was offered to us voluntarily, that's where I would like to follow up. I know you specifically mentioned Bank of America to him yesterday. I am aware of that situation and would like to follow up with you on it.
Okay, great. But you're not aware of any request made by the Bureau? you're
Not
saying
outside
today.
legal process.
Okay, got it. Are you aware of any of these methods that have been reported using metadata, cell phone location data, financial data? Were any of these used by the FBI during Operation Legend or any other investigations over the summer related to civil violence then?
I'm not aware, sir. That would be my counterpart, but happy to follow up and have him follow up with you.
That would be great. I'd appreciate that. Thank you all for being here and for your service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.